Hello, readers and adventurers. Welcome to Literary Journeys with River. Today, we'll dive into the thrilling second book of the Percy Jackson and the Olympian series, The Sea of Monsters by Rick Riordan. Join Percy and his friends on a dangerous mission to save Camp Half-Blood, navigating a sea filled with terrifying creatures. This video is a summary, not the full book, so if you haven't read it yet, you're in for a great adventure. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more epic book summaries. Let's get started. Chapter 1. Percy was trapped in a nightmare that transported him to a small coastal town battered by a storm. Rain and wind lashed against the palm trees and colorful houses, while the roar of the ocean echoed in the distance. Suddenly, his friend Grover, a satyr, appeared, running frantically and covered in sand, fleeing from something that terrified him. Grover, with his goat legs hidden under jeans, tried to escape from a monstrous figure that relentlessly pursued him. The deformed and fearsome creature smashed a streetlight as it chased Grover through the deserted streets. In his flight, Grover hid in a bridal shop, hoping the monster would pass by. However, the danger didn't vanish. The creature shattered the shop's facade with a scream that resonated through the storm. Percy woke up abruptly in his room, still scared, but he realized it was just a dream. Morning light filtered through the window, and he heard his mother calling him to avoid being late for his last day of school. Though he tried to shake off the nightmare, Grover's words in the dream, "I have to escape. I have to warn them," and the shadow he thought he saw from his window left him uneasy. As he prepared for the day, Percy remembered his promise not to use his special pen, acclaimed, at home after causing a disaster before. Despite everything, he got dressed and decided not to dwell on what he had seen, though Grover's words in the dream lingered in his mind. At breakfast, his mother, who always sensed when something bothered him, asked if he was all right. Percy told her about his dream of Grover, and she listened attentively, though she tried to reassure him, saying that if something were wrong, they would have already received news from Camp Half-Blood. However, her concern became evident when she revealed that she had received a message from Chiron, the camp's director, warning that it might be dangerous for Percy to go there this year. Percy was stunned. The camp had always been his safe haven, but now his mother was telling him that the situation had changed and that she couldn't explain it at the moment. As the clock ticked on, Percy said goodbye to his mother with many questions unanswered. As he left, he noticed a strange shadow that faded away, a sign that something bigger was about to happen. Chapter 2. The day started as usual at Meriwether Prep, a progressive school in Manhattan where Percy, as always, struggled to focus due to his ADHD and dyslexia. In the first class, the students pretended to be on a deserted island, similar to Lord of the Flies, which resulted in total chaos led by the school bully, Matt Sloan. Sloan soon targeted Tyson, Percy's giant, homeless friend, who, despite his size and strength, was extremely sensitive and shy. Tyson, who lived in a cardboard box in an alley, was seen as a monster by most students, but Percy always defended him, even if it meant being the target of ridicule and threats. During science class, Tyson's clumsiness triggered a small explosion in the lab, but it was seen as an achievement, which momentarily cheered Percy up. However, the real challenge came in PE class, where Sloan organized a dodgeball game with the intent to humiliate and possibly injure Percy and Tyson. Sloan, accompanied by a group of strangely muscular and threatening visitors, ensured that Percy was on the weaker team. From the start, the balls flew with unusual force, and soon Percy realized that the visitors weren't human but Laestrygonians, cannibal giants. These monsters began throwing fireballs instead of regular dodgeballs, and Percy found himself in grave danger. Amid the chaos, Tyson surprised everyone by catching the fiery balls and hurling them back at the giants, destroying them in the process. Even so, the situation became critical when the last Laestrygonian, Bone Crusher, hurled a fireball that sent Tyson flying against a wall. When all seemed lost for Percy, a figure appeared out of nowhere and took down the last giant. It was Annabeth, his friend from Camp Half-Blood. Annabeth had been watching over Percy all morning, waiting for the right moment to intervene. After finishing off the giant, Annabeth urged Percy to leave the burning gym and take Tyson, whom she looked at with disdain, something Percy didn't understand at the time. With the chaos in the gym and the arrival of teachers and police, Percy decided to flee with Tyson, knowing no one would believe the truth about what had happened. Chapter 3. Annabeth was waiting for them in an alley as the sirens of the fire department wailed in the direction of the school. Although Percy was glad to see her after so long, Annabeth's concern about Tyson puzzled him. Despite Tyson having saved Percy several times in the gym, Annabeth looked at him with disdain and distrust, as if he were a danger rather than an ally. Percy, upset by Annabeth's attitude, tried to defend his friend, explaining that Tyson was a good guy. However, Annabeth seemed unwilling to change her opinion. When Annabeth mentioned that the giants who attacked them in the gym were Laestrygonians, a race of cannibals, Percy realized the gravity of the situation. Additionally, Annabeth shared her concern about Camp Half-Blood being in danger, making their return urgent. Annabeth explained to Tyson the existence of the Greek gods and demigods, revealing that Percy was the son of Poseidon. Although Tyson seemed to accept the revelation without issue, the sound of police sirens interrupted the conversation, forcing Annabeth to take quick action to escape. With time against them, she decided they would take the Grey Sisters' taxi, a magical means of transportation that would take them to camp. Annabeth summoned the taxi by tossing a gold drachma to the ground, which made a strange gray taxi made of smoke appear. Aboard the taxi, Percy discovered that the Grey Sisters shared a single eye and tooth, making them blind and unable to drive properly without them. The ride became chaotic, with the taxi zigzagging through the streets of New York and the sisters fighting over the eye and tooth. During the journey, one of the sisters accidentally mentioned a series of numbers that, according to them, Percy was looking for: 30, 31, 75, 12. Although Percy didn't understand the meaning, he insisted they reveal more information before returning the eye. Finally, he decided not to press further and returned the eye just as they were arriving at camp. When the taxi abruptly stopped at the base of Half-Blood Hill, Percy realized that something was terribly wrong. From the top of the hill, he saw that the campers were under attack, confirming Annabeth's fears that Camp Half-Blood was in grave danger. Chapter 4. Upon reaching Half-Blood Hill, Percy and his friends were met with a terrifying scene. Two enormous bronze bulls, the size of elephants, were spewing fire from their mouths as they mercilessly attacked the campers. Percy couldn't understand how these monsters had crossed the camp's magical barriers, which should have stopped them. But there they were, causing chaos and destruction. Annabeth immediately recognized Clarisse, the leader of a small group of warriors desperately trying to hold the bulls at bay. Despite the rivalry between Percy and Clarisse, Percy didn't hesitate to run up the hill to help her, with Annabeth and Tyson following him. Annabeth warned Percy that these bulls were creations of Hephaestus, creatures from mythology known as the Colchis bulls, impossible to defeat without special protection, but Percy was determined to fight anyway. Clarisse, showing her usual bravery, ordered her soldiers to form a phalanx to resist the attack. However, the bulls were too powerful. One of them charged at the group, breaking their formation and sending Clarisse flying into a scorched patch of ground. Percy ran to save her, managing to drag her out of the path of the other bull just in time. Though Percy tried to face the bull, its power and speed were overwhelming, and soon Percy found himself in a tight spot, with his ankle injured and the bulls ready to finish him off. Annabeth, desperate, authorized Tyson to cross the camp's magic line to save Percy. With a roar, Tyson appeared just in time, enduring a torrent of fire that would have destroyed anyone else. Despite the flames, Tyson remained unharmed and attacked the bull with his fists, denting its bronze head and knocking it out. Annabeth ran to help Percy, giving him Olympian nectar to ease his pain. While Clarisse finished off the other bull, Percy, still confused, realized that Tyson was not an ordinary mortal. Annabeth revealed the truth. Tyson was a Cyclops, a mythical being immune to fire, which explained his incredible resilience and strength. Percy, still processing this revelation, understood that his friend was not who he thought, but there was no time to reflect. Clarisse, irritated by Percy's intervention, led him to Talia's tree, the camp's symbol of protection. There, Percy saw something that chilled him to the bone. The tree was dying, its yellow needles falling to the ground, and green sap oozing from a hole in the trunk. Someone had poisoned the tree, weakening the camp's magical barriers and putting everyone in grave danger. Chapter 5. Percy felt disoriented upon returning to Camp Half-Blood, as if someone had altered his favorite place in the world. Although the facilities looked the same, the atmosphere was tense. The campers, instead of relaxing and playing, were arming themselves and preparing for possible attacks. The forest looked sickly, and the scorch marks on the hill were evidence of the recent battle. As Percy, Annabeth, and Tyson walked toward the big house, they noticed that the other campers either ignored them or looked at Tyson with distrust. However, Tyson, with his usual innocence, marveled at everything he saw. When they reached the big house, they found Chiron packing his things. Tyson, surprised to see the centaur, called him Pony, which offended Chiron, but Annabeth quickly hugged Chiron, worried about his departure. Chiron explained that he had been fired by Mr. D due to the poisoning of Talia's tree, since someone had to be blamed for the disaster. Although Chiron was not at fault, some of the Olympian gods had lost trust in him. Percy tried to persuade Chiron to let him and Annabeth search for a solution, but Chiron warned them that the camp was in grave danger and that any impulsive action could be a trap by the Titan Lord, Kronos. The situation was desperate, and as Chiron said goodbye, he asked Percy and Annabeth to stay safe. Annabeth swore by the river Styx to protect Percy, indicating the seriousness of the situation. With Chiron's departure, Percy and Annabeth headed to the dining pavilion, where the campers gathered for dinner. Annabeth went to her cabin, while Percy and Tyson stayed at the Poseidon table. Upon entering, Percy noticed that all eyes were on them, especially on Tyson. From the head table, Mr. D, with his usual disdain, and Tantalus, the new activities director, watched them. Tantalus, a condemned soul from the underworld, was a thin, scruffy man, clearly resentful of his eternal punishment. During dinner, Tantalus announced that the dangerous chariot races, a tradition suspended due to numerous deaths and mutilations in the past, would resume. Clarice tried to express her concern about the camp's safety, but Tantalus ignored her, mocking her and focusing attention on Tyson, whom he described as a monster that should be locked away somewhere. Just as Tantalus was about to decide Tyson's fate, something surprising happened. A glowing green trident appeared over Tyson's head, the same symbol that had appeared over Percy when Poseidon claimed him. This revealed that Tyson was also Poseidon's son, making him Percy's half-brother. The news caused astonishment and mockery among the campers, but for Percy, it was an emotional blow. Now, in addition to facing all the dangers threatening the camp, he would have to accept that he had a new cabin mate who was also a Cyclops and his own brother. Chapter 6. The days following Tyson's arrival at Camp Half-Blood were difficult for Percy. Having Tyson as a new cabin mate was not easy. Although Tyson was excited and happy to be recognized as Percy's brother, Percy couldn't help but feel embarrassed and frustrated. Being Poseidon's son, which had once been an honor for Percy, now seemed like a cruel joke, especially with the murmurs and mockery of the other campers. Annabeth tried to cheer him up by suggesting they participate in the chariot races together. Although they both hated Tantalus and were worried about the camp's future, they decided that competing would be a good distraction while they searched for a solution to save Talia's tree. One morning, while working on the chariot's design, Annabeth and Percy argued about Tyson. Annabeth, though she had allowed Tyson into the camp to save Percy, couldn't hide her disdain for Cyclops. Percy, on the other hand, felt hurt seeing Annabeth treat Tyson like a monster, although he understood that there was something deeper that Annabeth didn't want to reveal. In the following days, Percy tried to ignore his problems by immersing himself in various camp activities. Tyson, meanwhile, spent time with Beckendorf in the armory, learning to work with metal. However, Percy couldn't shake his worries, especially the strange dreams he kept having about Grover. In those dreams, Grover was trapped in a cave, dressed as a bride, and was being tormented by a Cyclops named Polyphemus. Grover was in danger, but Percy didn't know how to help him. The night before the chariot race, Tyson and Percy finished preparing their vehicle, a blue and white chariot adorned with drawings of waves and a trident. Although Percy knew Tyson would be a hindrance in the race due to his size, he decided it was only fair that he participate. That night, before going to sleep, Percy confided in Tyson, sharing his worries and frustrations with Poseidon. Although Tyson fell asleep before Percy could finish, Percy felt a bit better after talking. The next day, the race began under intense humidity and a mysterious mist. A flock of birds, which turned out to be the fearsome Stymphalian birds, began attacking the participants and spectators, creating chaos and panic. Percy and Annabeth, realizing they needed a quick solution, ran to the big house to seek help. Remembering the story of Hercules, Annabeth used Chiron's sound system to play a loud Dean Martin song, which turned out to be the key to driving the birds away. With the birds dispersed, Apollo's archers eliminated the few that remained. Although the camp was safe, the damage was significant, and most of the chariots had been destroyed. However, Tantalus, instead of thanking Percy and Annabeth for saving the camp, awarded Clarisse as the race winner and announced that he would punish Percy and Annabeth for interrupting it, leaving everyone perplexed by his injustice. Chapter 7. The punishment imposed by Tantalus after the chaos caused by the Stymphalian birds was as absurd as everything else. According to him, the attack was the fault of Percy, Annabeth, and Tyson for having disturbed the birds during the chariot race. As punishment, he condemned the three to clean pots and pans in the camp kitchen, which meant spending the afternoon scrubbing in a basement with the cleaning harpies. Although Tyson eagerly accepted the punishment, Annabeth and Percy spent hours struggling with the dangerous and stifling task, especially since there were more dishes than usual, as Tantalus had ordered a banquet in honor of Clarisse, which included fried Stymphalian birds. The silver lining of this punishment was that Percy and Annabeth had time to talk and share their concerns. Percy again told Annabeth about his dream of Grover, and Annabeth began to believe him, especially when she realized that Grover might have found the Golden Fleece, a mythical artifact with the power to heal and revitalize nature. Annabeth explained the story of the fleece, how it had brought prosperity to the kingdom of Colchis, and how, in theory, it could heal Talia's tree and save the camp. Although the idea seemed too perfect, Percy and Annabeth knew it was their only hope. They decided to present their proposal to the camp at the campfire that night. That night, in front of all the campers gathered around the campfire, Percy outlined his plan. He told them about his dream of Grover and how he had found the Golden Fleece on an island in the Sea of Monsters. Annabeth backed up the story, explaining the importance of the fleece and how it could save the camp. The audience was intrigued and excited, but Tantalus tried to downplay the plan's importance. However, when Percy revealed the coordinates the Grey Sisters had given him, Annabeth confirmed that they corresponded to a location in the Atlantic, near the Bermuda Triangle, known as the Sea of Monsters. Excitement grew among the campers, and soon they began chanting for Tantalus to authorize a search mission. Unable to stop the wave of support, Tantalus reluctantly agreed, but in an unexpected twist, he appointed Clarisse as the mission leader, ignoring Percy's pleas that Grover was his friend and that he had received the dream. The Ares campers celebrated the decision, while Percy was left frustrated and angry. Despite Annabeth's and other campers' protests, Tantalus made it clear that no one would leave the camp without his permission, and those who tried would be severely punished. That night, Percy couldn't sleep. He felt that he had to do something to save Grover, but he didn't know how to do it without Tantalus's permission. As he pondered his options, he went to the beach to clear his mind. There, he had an unexpected encounter with a man who turned out to be the god Hermes. Hermes, Luke's father, seemed to understand Percy's inner struggle and offered him two gifts: a thermos containing the four winds and a bottle of special vitamins that could be of great help on his mission. Hermes also made it clear that, although Percy didn't have permission to leave the camp, sometimes heroes had to make tough decisions and follow their own path. Hermes gave Percy one last warning about the limited time he had before it was too late to save Grover. Just as Annabeth and Tyson arrived looking for him, Percy had to decide whether he would dare to embark on the quest on his own, defying Tantalus's orders. Chapter 8. Percy, Annabeth, and Tyson were on the beach when their friends found them, just as the harpies were beginning to close in. Despite initial reluctance, Percy decided that Tyson would accompany them on the mission so as not to leave him in danger at camp, which annoyed Annabeth, who seemed to have an unexplained resentment against Cyclops. With no time to argue, Percy asked for his father Poseidon's help, and suddenly, 3 hippocampi emerged from the water, taking them at high speed toward the cruise ship visible on the horizon. The cruise ship, Princess Andromeda, was a majestic and enormous vessel with multiple decks and adorned with a huge figurehead depicting Princess Andromeda chained. As in the myth, Percy, Annabeth, and Tyson managed to board the ship using a hand ladder. Once on board, they noticed something very strange. The cruise ship was deserted, with no signs of life, although Tyson began to smell something foul, indicating the presence of monsters. As they explored the ship, they reached the pool deck and finally found an open suite ready to be occupied, with treats and welcome drinks. They decided to rest there and prepare for what was to come. Despite the apparent comfort, Annabeth and Percy remained uneasy, sensing that something was not right in that place. That night, Percy had a disturbing dream. He first found himself in Tartarus, where he heard Kronos' mocking voice, trying to discourage him by reminding him of the difficulties he faced because of his father. Then the dream changed, and Percy saw Grover, still trapped in Polyphemus's cave, desperately trying to delay his wedding with the Cyclops. Percy woke up unsettled by what he had seen, just as the ship emitted a morning call. The next day, Percy, Annabeth, and Tyson encountered passengers and crew members, all in a strange state, almost as if they were in a trance. More alarmingly, they found a hellhound at the cafeteria buffet, ignored by the zombie-like passengers. Then they hid in a bathroom when they heard 2 serpentine creatures talking about a growing force aboard. But the worst surprise came when they heard Luke's voice. He was on the ship, and from what they overheard, he was planning something terrible with the help of an ally named Agrius. Despite the danger, Annabeth and Percy agreed that they couldn't leave the ship without discovering Luke's plans. With that goal in mind, they set out to follow him and confront him. Chapter 9. Percy, Annabeth, and Tyson decided to investigate the Admiral's suite together, despite Annabeth's fears and Tyson's reluctance. As they approached, Tyson began imitating Luke's voice and that of another man, repeating a conversation he picked up with his keen hearing. Suddenly, the suite doors opened, and they were confronted by Luke, accompanied by 2 furry giants armed with javelins. The main cabin was both impressive and terrifying. It was decorated with luxurious furniture and large windows, but dominated by a large golden sarcophagus engraved with scenes of destruction. Luke, looking more sophisticated than before, greeted them with a mocking smile. Luke had changed. He now wore elegant clothes and had an air of superiority. He introduced them to his assistants, Agrius and Aureus, 2 half-human, half-bear twins who were terrifying. Luke tried to convince Percy and Annabeth to join his cause, arguing that the gods didn't deserve their loyalty and that he had plans to destroy Olympus and create a new world. Percy challenged him, mentioning that his father Hermes had sent him to find Luke, which angered Luke. The conversation revealed that Luke had poisoned Talia's tree and was gathering powerful allies to resurrect Kronos, whose body was being reassembled inside the sarcophagus. Despite the promises of power and riches that Luke offered, Annabeth and Percy firmly rejected him. Luke, disappointed, ordered Aureus to take them to the hold to be devoured by an Ethiopian dragon. As they were being led to the hold, Percy came up with a plan. Just as they were crossing the open deck, Tyson caught on to Percy's signal and threw Aureus into the nearby pool. This unleashed chaos. Annabeth, Percy, and Tyson fought off the guards and monsters as an alarm began to sound. Amid the chaos, they managed to untie a lifeboat and cut the ropes holding it to the ship, plunging into the ocean as a shower of arrows whistled over their heads. Chapter 10. During their plunge toward the water, Percy, Annabeth, and Tyson faced imminent danger. Percy remembered Hermes' magic thermos and, quickly, Tyson pulled it out of the duffel bag. When Percy turned it a quarter of a turn, a powerful blast of wind propelled them forward, turning what seemed like a deadly landing into a rapid and abrupt race over the water. The Princess Andromeda soon faded into the distance, disappearing over the horizon. As they skimmed over the waves, Annabeth and Percy tried to send an iris message to Chiron to inform him of the situation. Although they managed to make contact, the noise and chaos on the other side made communication difficult. Chiron was in the middle of a strange party filled with shouting and music, making it hard to understand his warnings. The message abruptly cut off before they could get much information. Finally, they arrived at Virginia Beach, surprised to have traveled so far in such a short time. Percy discovered that he could accurately calculate their coordinates, a gift inherited from his father Poseidon. However, before they could reflect on it, a coast guard began to approach, forcing them to flee toward Chesapeake Bay. Annabeth steered the boat toward a place she knew well, a swampy area where they could hide. They reached a hidden refuge in the swamp, built years ago by Annabeth, Talia, and Luke. This place stirred painful memories for Annabeth and created tension between her and Percy. However, before they could talk further, Tyson appeared with a box of donuts he had found at a nearby shop, which seemed suspicious to Annabeth. They decided to investigate the shop, Monster Donuts, which had inexplicably appeared in the middle of the swamp. Annabeth, increasingly concerned, explained that certain chain stores could be connected to a monster's life force. Her suspicions were confirmed when a gigantic hydra with 7 heads appeared, searching for the kids. The hydra had followed their trail to the refuge and attacked them, spewing acid that dissolved everything in its path. Percy tried to fight the hydra, but when he cut off one of its heads, 2 more grew in its place. Annabeth remembered that only fire could stop the heads from growing, but they had no way to generate it. As the situation worsened, the sound of a steam engine approached from the river. Clarissa's familiar voice was heard, ordering to fire. An explosion rocked the shore, destroying the hydra in a cloud of smoke and goo. Before them appeared the CSS Birmingham, a Civil War ironclad manned by Confederate zombie soldiers. Clarisse, dressed in her Greek armor, invited them aboard with a sarcastic smile, saying that although they seemed like losers, she would rescue them. Chapter 11. Clarisse had taken command of the CSS Birmingham, leading Percy, Annabeth, and Tyson on a suicidal mission. During a tour of the ship, Clarisse boasted about her power and the crew of undead sailors who obeyed her without question. The Confederate dead, bound to the will of Ares, were completely loyal to Clarisse, which filled her with dangerous arrogance. Meanwhile, tension mounted between them, especially as Clarisse ignored Annabeth's warnings about the threat Luke and his monster-filled cruise ship posed. After the tour, they were taken to dine in the cramped captain's cabin, surrounded by ghosts. Proud and determined, Clarisse refused any offer of help from Percy and Annabeth, convinced she could complete the mission on her own. However, Percy and Annabeth were worried about the imminent danger Luke represented, but Clarisse, blinded by her desire for glory, refused to listen. That night, Percy had another dream of Grover, who was still imprisoned by Polyphemus on the island. Grover was desperately trying to delay his wedding, but Polyphemus was not easily fooled. The Cyclops showed Grover the Golden Fleece, which kept the island in a state of lush beauty. However, Grover's despair became evident as he was so close to freedom, yet so far away. Percy woke abruptly to the ship's alarms. The Confederate zombies were shouting that they were approaching the entrance to the Sea of Monsters. As he climbed to the deck, Percy paused, sensing a familiar and unpleasant presence. Through a ventilation grate, he observed Clarisse speaking with her father, Ares. The conversation made it clear that Ares had no faith in his daughter, threatening her with terrible consequences if she failed in her mission. Trembling, Clarisse promised to succeed, but Percy knew the situation was much more dangerous than it seemed. Reaching the deck, Percy joined Annabeth and Tyson, where Clarisse showed them the dangerous passage between Charybdis and Scylla. Annabeth and Percy were terrified by Clarisse's strategy to confront Charybdis head-on, relying on the ship's cannons to destroy her. Tyson, with his innate knowledge of mechanics, warned that the engines were overloaded and the ship wouldn't hold up much longer, but Clarisse was determined to press on. The situation quickly deteriorated when the ship was dragged toward Charybdis's whirlpool. Despite Tyson's efforts to stabilize the engine, the pressure increased, and the ship began to break apart. In a desperate act, Tyson offered to go down to the boilers to try to fix the situation, and although Percy tried to stop him, Tyson was determined to save them. As the ship was pulled into Charybdis's immense suction, things worsened. Scylla, the monstrous sister of Charybdis, began attacking from the cliffs above, snatching the zombie sailors one by one. Clarice, Annabeth, and Percy fought to maintain control, but the situation was dire. Percy decided to look for Tyson, but before he could, he was caught by one of Scylla's heads and flung into the air. Percy managed to wound Scylla, but fell into the water just as the CSS Birmingham exploded, destroyed by the fire from its own boilers. As the ship's remains sank, Percy was caught in a whirlpool of debris and water, convinced that he had lost Tyson forever. Just when all seemed lost, Hermes's magic thermos burst open, sending a gust of wind that scattered the ship's remnants and saved Percy from certain death. However, as he sank into the ocean, Percy was overwhelmed by the loss of Tyson and wished he could drown like any other mortal. Chapter 12. Percy woke aboard an improvised rowboat with a sail made from a Confederate uniform. Annabeth was beside him, managing the sail to navigate through the sea. Dazed, Percy asked about Tyson, and Annabeth sadly informed him that he hadn't survived the explosion. Though they tried to hold on to hope, both knew the chances of Tyson being alive were slim. As they sailed through the sea of monsters, the conversation shifted to Chiron's prophecy. Annabeth revealed that the prophecy spoke of a demigod of the Big Three who, upon turning 16, would decide the fate of Olympus, either saving or destroying it. Percy began to grasp the magnitude of his destiny and why the gods feared him. Suddenly, a seagull dropped some twigs, signaling that land was near. Soon they spotted an island with a complex of white buildings and a harbor filled with all kinds of vessels, from yachts to submarines. When they reached the island, a woman welcomed them, introducing herself as part of the CC Spa and Resort. Although Percy and Annabeth suspected it might be a trap, they were too exhausted to resist the offer of food and rest. The woman guided them through a luxurious complex, where everything seemed designed for enjoyment and relaxation. However, the beauty of the place only made Percy miss Tyson more. Soon, they were brought before CC, the resort's owner, a dazzling woman who was weaving on a massive loom. Annabeth was impressed by CC's skill, while Percy felt uneasy. CC suggested that Annabeth explore the spa services while she attended to Percy. CC began working on Percy, convincing him that he needed a change to reach his perfect self. Under her spell, Percy drank a magical smoothie that transformed him into a guinea pig. Desperate, he was locked in a cage with other guinea pigs, all of whom were men that CC had transformed. Meanwhile, Annabeth, also under CC's spell, was about to be convinced to join the sorceress and learn her arts. However, when Annabeth saw Percy turned into a guinea pig, she realized the danger. Using the magic vitamins from Hermes that she had found in Percy's pockets, she managed to counteract CC's magic and reverse Percy's transformation. In an unexpected twist, the other guinea pigs turned into pirates, one of them being the feared Blackbeard. The pirates, enraged by their long imprisonment, began pillaging the spa while Percy and Annabeth escaped to the harbor. Guided by an inexplicable instinct, Percy chose an old sailing ship called Queen Anne's Revenge to flee. Despite the ship's complexity, Percy managed to control it with surprising ease, as if the ship responded to his commands. Together, Percy and Annabeth sailed away from the island, heading into the Sea of Monsters, leaving the pirates and the sorceress Circe behind. Chapter 13. Percy discovered he had a natural talent for navigating the Queen Anne's Revenge. The ship responded to all his commands and sped through the waves gracefully. However, the joy of his new skill was overshadowed by the loss of Tyson and his constant worry for Grover. They sailed through the night. Annabeth tried to help, but the ship's rocking soon left her seasick, forcing her to rest. Percy, for his part, couldn't stop thinking about Circe's island and how Annabeth had saved him from a life as a guinea pig. He also reflected on the nature of fear and cowardice, wondering if those feelings had always been inside him. As they sailed on, they spotted monsters in the sea and also nereids, who vanished into the depths before Percy could greet them. Near midnight, Annabeth came out on deck, and together they passed by an island with a smoking volcano. Annabeth warned him that it was one of Hephaestus's forges, where he built his metal monsters, like the bronze bulls, and urged him to sail away quickly. Worried by Annabeth's story about Cyclops, Percy asked her to tell him more about Talia's death. Annabeth explained that years ago, a Cyclops had trapped them in Brooklyn, separating them and using her father's voice to deceive her. She recalled how, at 7 years old, she had to face the Cyclops alone, and how, despite saving her friends, she felt that incident had led to Talia's death. The story left Percy reflecting on Annabeth's courage and whether he would be able to face a similar fate. That night, Percy had a nightmare in which he was in Luke's cabin aboard the Princess Andromeda. There, surrounded by spirits and with Kronos' golden sarcophagus emitting an ominous glow, Percy felt the need to stop the Titan. But before he could do anything, an unknown girl appeared, carrying a shield with Medusa's head and a sword. Defiantly, she tried to open the sarcophagus but was swallowed by a golden light as Kronos laughed. Percy woke up startled, with Annabeth shaking him to get up, as they had reached the island of the sirens. Annabeth confessed that she wanted to hear the siren's song, despite the danger, because according to legend, they revealed hidden truths about oneself. Percy tried to dissuade her, but Annabeth was determined. She asked him to tie her to the mast and, no matter what happened, not to untie her. Percy reluctantly agreed, preparing her for what was to come. Once in sight of the island, Percy plugged his ears with wax and steered the ship while Annabeth struggled against the temptation to free herself. As they drew closer, Annabeth fell into a trance, broke free from the ropes, and jumped into the water, swimming toward the island. Percy, without thinking, dove in after her. Swimming with all his might, Percy reached Annabeth just as she was about to reach the shore. The sirens then appeared, showing Percy the vision they offered Annabeth. A perfect world where her parents were together and happy. Luke awaited her as a friend and ally, and Manhattan had been rebuilt according to her designs. Percy understood how powerful the temptation was for Annabeth and fought with all his strength to pull her away. Submerged underwater, Percy used his abilities to create an air bubble around them, helping Annabeth regain her senses and realize the truth. Crying, she clung to Percy, and together they returned to the ship, escaping the sirens' deadly song. Once safe, Annabeth confessed that the sirens had shown her greatest weakness: hubris or excessive pride. It was her fatal flaw, the one that could lead her to believe she could do everything better than the gods themselves. Percy, while trying to console her, understood the gravity of her words. He knew that every hero had a fatal flaw, and though he didn't yet know what his was, Annabeth's warning left him uneasy. Suddenly, they spotted a new island on the horizon, with hills and beaches that Percy recognized from his dream. They had finally reached the Cyclops' lair. Chapter 14. The Cyclops' island wasn't what Percy expected. Instead of being a desolate and gloomy place, it was covered in green meadows, tropical fruit trees, and white sandy beaches. But not everything was as idyllic as it seemed. A rope bridge over a chasm indicated that something evil lurked nearby. As Percy and Annabeth approached the shore, both felt the power of the Golden Fleece atop a hill, a golden glow among the branches of a massive oak. At the base of the cliff, a herd of giant sheep, the size of hippos, grazed peacefully. However, when a deer appeared, the sheep attacked it like a school of piranhas, leaving only white bones in seconds. This complicated their mission to obtain the fleece, as crossing through those killer sheep seemed impossible. As they neared the beach, they discovered the lifeboat from the CSS Birmingham stranded on the sand. This meant there were survivors, giving Percy a faint hope that Tyson might be alive. They decided to anchor the Queen Anne's Revenge at the back of the island, where the cliffs rose vertically. They began climbing with great effort, with Annabeth leading the way. Both nearly fell several times but managed to reach the top, exhausted and on the brink of collapse. Just when they thought they could rest, they heard a gruff voice belonging to Polyphemus. Peering down, They saw that Clarisse was hanging upside down over a pot of boiling water, while Grover, still dressed as a bride, tried to deceive the Cyclops to save himself. Polyphemus was furious at being tricked, as he believed Grover was a Cyclops, not a satyr. While the monster pondered what to do, Grover tried to buy time by suggesting a recipe to make himself taste better. Polyphemus decided to postpone the feast until evening, throwing Clarisse and Grover into the cave and sealing the entrance with a massive rock. Percy and Annabeth tried to move the rock to no avail, realizing that the only way to save their friends was to make Polyphemus move the rock. Annabeth, known for her intelligence, proposed a distraction based on the story of Odysseus, who had tricked Polyphemus by calling himself Nobody. While Percy hid under a sheep, Annabeth, invisible, began taunting the Cyclops from outside the cave, calling herself Nobody to enrage him. The ruse worked, and Polyphemus, blinded by anger, stormed out in search of Nobody, leaving the cave unguarded. Percy took the opportunity to enter the cave. Inside, he found Grover and Clarisse, who were trying to free themselves. With the help of Riptide, Percy cut the ropes binding Clarisse. Just as they were about to escape, a crash and a scream from Annabeth made Percy fear the worst. Annabeth was in danger, and time was running out. Chapter 15. Polyphemus, with a wicked grin, had caught Annabeth as she tried to escape under her invisibility cap. He held her by the legs, gloating over his capture and planning to roast her with mango hot sauce. Annabeth was injured and disoriented, and Percy, Clarisse, and Grover knew they had to act quickly. Percy decided to confront Polyphemus directly to distract him, while Clarisse and Grover attacked from the sides. Although Clarisse and Grover weren't entirely comfortable leaving Percy alone, they agreed to the plan, knowing it was their only chance to save Annabeth. Percy drew the Cyclops' attention, mocking him and calling himself Nobody, the name Odysseus had used centuries ago to deceive Polyphemus. The Cyclops, furious, dropped Annabeth, but let her fall roughly onto the rocks, knocking her unconscious. From that moment on, the battle became desperate. Grover and Clarisse attacked Polyphemus from the sides, trying to weaken him, while Percy faced him head-on. Despite their efforts, Polyphemus was a formidable opponent, and gradually Percy and his friends began to tire. Seeing that Grover had managed to get Annabeth to the bridge, Percy decided their only option was to retreat. He shouted for Clarisse to run to the bridge while he tried to slow down the Cyclops long enough for Grover to cut the ropes and trap the monster on the wrong side. When Percy and Clarisse reached the other side, Grover cut the last ropes, but Polyphemus managed to cross at the last moment, shouting with joy, thinking he had won. With a brutal blow, the Cyclops knocked down Clarisse and Grover, leaving Percy as the only one capable of facing him. In a burst of rage and desperation, Percy fought with all his might, finally managing to bring down Polyphemus and stand over him, with his sword pointed at the Cyclops' eye. Defeated, the Cyclops began to cry, pleading for his life and claiming he only wanted to protect his sheep. Percy, seeing a resemblance to Tyson and remembering that Polyphemus was also a son of Poseidon, hesitated to kill him. Before Percy could make a decision, Tyson appeared, hurling a rock that struck Polyphemus in the throat, sending the Cyclops tumbling into the abyss. Tyson, who had survived thanks to the help of Rainbow, the hippocampus, arrived just in time to save Percy and his friends. With the danger momentarily past, Tyson approached the tree where the Golden Fleece hung and retrieved it effortlessly, as the killer sheep didn't attack him, mistaking him for their master. Percy, seeing that Annabeth was seriously injured, asked Tyson to throw him the fleece, and by covering Annabeth with it, the artifact's healing power began to work immediately. Annabeth regained consciousness and began to heal rapidly, while Tyson kept the sheep at bay. The group, knowing they didn't have much time, decided to head to the beach, where Percy summoned the Queen Anne's Revenge to pick them up. When the ship arrived, everyone hurried to board it, but just as they thought they were safe, Polyphemus, still alive and furious, reappeared, wading toward them with a rock in each hand, determined to destroy them before they could escape. Chapter 16. Polyphemus, in a frenzy, charged into the water after Percy and his group, hurling rocks at them as they swam desperately toward the Queen Anne's revenge. Grover, Clarice, and Annabeth struggled to stay afloat, but Polyphemus wouldn't stop, especially enraged at seeing Tyson, whom he considered a traitor for helping the humans. Percy tried to convince Tyson to follow him, but his brother was paralyzed when Polyphemus accused him of betraying his own kind. Although Tyson tried to reason with the old Cyclops, Polyphemus's brutality knew no bounds. When Polyphemus attacked, Tyson was gravely injured, and Percy was forced to face the monster alone. Polyphemus and Percy fought in the water, with Percy using his control over the waves to attack, but the Cyclops' brute strength was overwhelming. However, Percy managed to strike Polyphemus's damaged eye, temporarily blinding and weakening him. With Tyson's help, Percy managed to knock Polyphemus down once more, and together, the two brothers fled toward the sea. While Clarice and Grover reached the ship with Annabeth and the Golden Fleece, Polyphemus, in his blind fury, hurled a rock that struck the hull of the Queen Anne's Revenge, shattering it and causing it to sink rapidly. Percy and Tyson tried to reach the ship by swimming, but the whirlpool forming as the ship sank complicated the situation. As their friends were dragged into the vortex, Percy knew they needed urgent help. It was then that Tyson and Percy joined their thoughts and called for Rainbow, the hippocampus, and his companions. The hippocampi arrived just in time, rescuing Annabeth, Grover, Clarice, and Tyson, carrying them away from Polyphemus's island as the Cyclops prematurely celebrated his victory. Exhausted and grateful for the hippocampi's intervention, the group left Polyphemus's island behind. Annabeth, completely drained, collapsed on her hippocampus and fell asleep, while Percy covered her with the Golden Fleece, their most precious reward. Before falling asleep himself, Percy kept his promise and whispered to Annabeth that she was amazing. Finally, he rested, knowing that although they had lost the ship, they had won the battle and recovered the Golden Fleece. Chapter 17. Percy woke to the feeling of salt water on his face and Annabeth gently shaking him. Before them, the sun was setting behind the skyscrapers of a city that Annabeth recognized as Miami. However, the hippocampi were behaving strangely, swimming in circles and neighing nervously. Percy understood that they didn't want to get any closer due to the pollution and the presence of so many humans, so they decided to swim to shore. After bidding farewell to the hippocampi, who disappeared into the ocean, Percy and his friends swam toward the docks, blending in with the crowd of tourists. To his surprise, Tyson revealed that he had saved the waterproof bag with money Hermes had given them, allowing them to have some cash. Annabeth, checking the date in a newspaper, was alarmed to see that they had been away from camp for 10 days. Clarice, dejected, sank onto the pavement, feeling defeated. Percy, understanding the pressure Clarice was under, decided it was time for him to lead. With the money they had, Percy hailed a taxi and handed Clarice the Golden Fleece, entrusting her with the mission of bringing it back to camp before Talia's tree died completely. Clarice, initially incredulous, accepted the responsibility and headed to the airport. Annabeth and Grover were perplexed by Percy's decision, but before they could discuss it, they were ambushed by Luke and his thugs. With a sword at his throat, Percy and his friends were forced aboard the Princess Andromeda. On the aft deck, Luke demanded to know where the fleece was, but Percy, in a clever move, distracted him long enough to throw a drachma through a fountain, creating an iris message. The image of Camp Half-Blood appeared in the rainbow, with Dionysus, Tantalus, and all the campers as witnesses. Percy, taking advantage of the situation, made Luke confess his crimes, revealing that he had poisoned Talia's tree and planned to use the fleece to revive Kronos. Dionysus, after hearing the confession, reinstated Chiron as activities director and dismissed Tantalus, who vanished amidst shouts of frustration. Although Percy felt satisfied that he had exposed Luke, enraged, ordered his men to surround them. Luke made it clear that he didn't intend to let Percy leave his ship alive. Chapter 18. Percy, cornered by Luke and his warriors, challenged his enemy to a one-on-one duel. Luke, trapped by the eyes of his men, had no choice but to accept. Before they could start the duel, Agrius appeared with a black Pegasus, ready for Luke to flee. However, the confrontation began. Luke, wielding his sword Backbiter, attacked with fury, and Percy, without a shield, barely managed to defend himself. Although Percy tried to use the pool to gain an advantage, Luke was too skilled. In no time, Percy was wounded in the leg and barely able to stand. Confident of his victory, Luke ordered Aureus to eat Annabeth and Grover, but at that precise moment, a red-plumed arrow pierced the air and struck Aureus in the mouth, killing him instantly. Luke's warriors were stunned as a dozen centaurs, led by Chiron, stormed onto the Princess Andromeda's deck. The centaurs, with their extravagant and colorful appearance, launched a fierce and chaotic attack. Despite Luke's rage, the centaurs overran his troops, firing arrows and paintball guns, and quickly whisked Percy and his friends away. After rescuing Percy and the others, Chiron took them to a centaur camp in a remote swamp. There, while Annabeth and Grover tended to Tyson, Chiron treated Percy's wounds and explained how he had intercepted his Iris message to track them down and come to their aid. Percy, grateful but still worried about the threat of Luke and Kronos, expressed his fear about the prophecy involving him. Chiron tried to comfort Percy, explaining the importance of heroes as defenders of humanity against the monsters that embody chaos. However, Percy still felt overwhelmed by the responsibility that lay on him. It was then that Chiron revealed a secret that left him chilled. The Titan Kronos was not just an enemy to him, he was his own father. Chapter 19. Thanks to the centaur's speed and skill, Percy, Annabeth, and Tyson arrived at Camp Half-Blood shortly after Clarisse. The journey was silent, especially between Percy and Chiron, who avoided discussing Kronos and Chiron's relationship with him. The camp atmosphere was one of relief, though there was an evident weariness after the harsh weeks they had endured. When Clarisse placed the Golden Fleece on Talia's tree, the magic began to take effect. The moon shone brighter, a cool breeze swept through the valley, and the pine needles started to regain their green color, expelling the poison that had been killing the tree. The atmosphere changed, and the camp came back to life. Clarisse was celebrated as a hero, carried on the shoulders of her companions, while Percy and Annabeth were quietly ignored, which, for them, was a relief. That night, at the campfire, Percy enjoyed the sense of normalcy, though Clarisse didn't miss the chance to warn him that their rivalry wasn't over. The next morning, Chiron surprised everyone by announcing that the chariot race would go on as planned. The news was met with enthusiasm, and Percy, Annabeth, and Tyson prepared for the competition. Tyson, though reluctant to get on the chariot, took charge of improving it with his mechanical skills, giving Percy's team a significant advantage. The night before the race, Percy received an unexpected visit from Hermes. Though Percy apologized for failing to get Luke to reconsider, Hermes, far from being angry, showed understanding and sadness, reflecting on the difficult relationship gods have with their mortal children. Hermes gave Percy a blue envelope containing a message from his father, Poseidon, with just one word, prepare. With Poseidon's warning in mind, Percy focused on the race. Tyson gave him a special watch he had been working on, which turned out to be a magical shield. During the race, Percy's team faced multiple challenges, from javelin attacks to a threat of Greek fire, but thanks to the combination of Annabeth's skill, Percy's strength, and Tyson's improvements, they overcame every obstacle. In the end, Percy and Annabeth won the race. Annabeth, recognizing Tyson's importance in their success, dedicated the victory to him. The crowd cheered for Tyson, who finally received the recognition he deserved. Percy, thrilled by the triumph and the support of his friends, felt that, at least for a moment, everything was in its place. Chapter 20. The afternoon after the race was one of the happiest for Percy, Grover, Annabeth, and Tyson at camp. Grover announced that he would stay the rest of the summer before resuming his search for Pan, which delighted everyone, though his musical skills were still a nightmare for the plants and probably anyone with ears. Percy and Grover decided to maintain the empathic connection they had developed, despite the risks this posed, as a testament to their strong friendship. During archery class, Chiron took Percy aside and informed him that he had resolved his legal issues related to the destruction of the Meriwether Prep Gym, using a bit of mist manipulation. Though Percy was glad the police weren't after him, he knew he wouldn't be able to return to that school next year. Chiron also allowed him to speak with his mother, who, though worried, was relieved to know that Percy was safe. That same afternoon, Tyson surprised Percy with the news that Poseidon had asked him to spend the rest of the summer at the bottom of the ocean, working in the Cyclops forges. Though Percy felt jealous that his father hadn't invited him earlier, he said goodbye to Tyson with sadness, aware that his brother would be happy under the sea, but he would miss him at camp. That night, a storm surrounded the camp without affecting it, thanks to the protection of the Golden Fleece. However, Percy's dreams were disturbing. First, Kronos mocked him, and then he had a dream in which Poseidon repeated his warning, "Prepare." Percy was abruptly awakened by Grover, who arrived agitated at his cabin with the news that something terrible had happened on Talia's hill. When they arrived, Percy saw the crowd gathered around Talia's tree, now fully healed thanks to the fleece. However, something else had happened. A girl lay unconscious at the tree's base, and Annabeth was beside her, crying. Percy ran to the girl, who had short, dark hair and wore clothes he didn't recognize. When he touched her, he felt a tingling in his fingers and knew she was a demigod. As he lifted her to help, the girl regained consciousness, and as she looked at him with electric blue eyes, Percy realized the true magnitude of what had happened. The girl introduced herself as Talia, daughter of Zeus. The Golden Fleece had done more than heal the tree. It had brought Zeus's daughter back to life, whose existence would further complicate the prophecy and Percy's destiny. Thank you for joining us on this literary journey through the Sea of Monsters. If you enjoyed this summary, don't forget to like it and share it with other book lovers. And subscribe so you don't miss our next adventures. What would you do if you had to face a sea monster? Leave your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear them.